I gave you is just the rules of procedure that we'll be talking about.
Okay.
No substantive changes. David just had the wording changed to match our language. So
Okay.
Bit of commission knowledge. All right, we have a quorum. Let's call the meeting to order. I see we have a member of the public, Manu, is that how you pronounce it? Is there something you'd like to speak with us about? Can't hear you with your microphone on.
Doesn't look like it.
If I can do anything about it. And if you can just say your name and address.
We can't
That'd be
get
great.
any sound from you, Mr. Chopra.
To check. Here we go. Nice to meet you too. You're in a good place. Soccer. Where's Lane Elementary School?
I'm pretty good at recognizing faces. I think Manu's a regular customer here at the library. I think I've seen him here quite a lot. So welcome, Manu. Pleased to see you could make it. I think I recognize you from being in the library frequently, right? Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank you for coming.
All right, so first thing on our agenda is approval of the minutes for August 22nd. I didn't see any changes go by on email. Did anyone have any amendments to the minutes? No? About an motion to approve? Second? Second. Okay, so moved by Sam, seconded by Benita. All those in favor? Aye. Jen, you voting yes? This is the minutes? Yeah, okay. So that's unanimous. Library District Director update.
All right, thank you very much. I'll probably take a little longer this evening, but as we've been talking about, like there's been, I don't know how many balls in the air, but some big balls are about to drop. And that's really important because this is probably something that Jennifer and I have been thinking about planning for really the past 6 to 8 months. So it's been a work in progress, but we're about ready to release a draft to all staff on the employee handbook, which would include, I believe, the recommendation of the personnel subcommittee is that we also include some information around compensation, not specifics in terms of details, because that won't come until the budget is where we're submitting the budget. And we're literally a couple of weeks away from putting out a healthcare package. So this will be coming out first, the package, the handbook for the staff. Sam and Jen have already reviewed it and provided feedback. We've updated that. It's currently in the hands of the lawyers. We should have it back next week, and I hope to bring it to your September 5th meeting. And then it will go out to the staff probably on or about September 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in that timeframe. So I want to go over just briefly kind of what informs the package, talk a little bit about the proposed plan for how we will handle compensation, and just talk about a little bit about some of the benefits. So we kind of went into this whole thing with several basic assumptions. And those were the following. We anticipated putting one set of benefits together for all the staff. That would include all the staff. We did presume that that benefits package would show an equal value, or as the staff have an expectation that it would be at least slightly better in the ways that it could be. And then the other third thing was that we fully acknowledging the fact that we're going to be hiring 30 or 40 people in the next year or two, perhaps more than that. We wanted that package to be as attractive as possible as a recruitment and retention tool. And so that the benefits that were available would be the best that we could possibly provide for employees on their first day, rather than going through the current city, like what we have at the city of Boulder, and what a lot of libraries do, where there are several steps. Like you have to get to a 3-year milestone, 6-month milestone, a 3-year milestone, a 5-year milestone, a 10-year milestone. Ours are actually quite good from the outset. So the plan that I'll review right now, and the basic kind of message that we have out to staff, is that there is an increased level of compensation. We are keeping para.
There's no handout related to that.
There is not yet,
Okay.
Anita. So I will bring the handout to you next meeting, but I wanted to preview some of the stuff
Okay.
and at least talk about the compensation philosophy before we got there, to see if we could have general agreement that that was the right way to go.
Okay.
So the basic things are increased compensation. The response from the survey was to increase compensation, keep para, come back with comparable or improved healthcare benefits. And then there was essentially a 50-50 split in the staff survey, if you remember, around whether or not we should move to a personal time off plan, which gave staff slightly more flexibility in their time, or maintain a sick leave bank, and a vacation leave pool. So the benefits package, we believe, is supporting the library values of equity for all staff members. It is a commitment to offering comparable or improved benefits. And we think tries to find the right compromise between that 50-50 split around personal time off and a separate sick leave bank. So the compensation approach that we're planning is somewhat different than what the city has provided, and probably somewhat different than what most of you are familiar with. It's not a cost of living increase either. So the form of compensation that we're looking at for the first year is driven in part by the personnel subcommittee's recognition that the median and average income that staff have in the library is pretty low. And so the idea that we've come up with is we're referring to it as pay leveling. So essentially what pay leveling does is it looks at the entire sum of all of the money that you have available for raises, and then it splits that money evenly among all staff members across the organization, prorated for how many hours they work. So I think our proposal is for that to happen this year and perhaps the next. Should we do it in those 2-year timeframes, we will be able to pass the county minimum wage of $21.06 an hour for all staff. So that is partly what drives the decision. What it means is that if you look at it like from the city lens, so the city are typically used to doing a merit-based pay. Their performance ties into what amount of pay they get. And the city does an overall calculation, say, of 3%. So depending upon where you land in the merit spectrum, you might get 3.5%, you might get 3%, you might get 2%. This approach, by giving an equal amount of money to everyone, it changes the percentages dramatically, and obviously dramatically for those people lower on the earning spectrum. So it's quite possible that a person with an income of approximately $50,000 a year could see an 8 to 10% increase in their salary. For a person at the higher end of the earning spectrum, say around 100,000, they would get roughly a 4% increase, and then progressively downward from there for the higher paid staff. There's only a handful of staff in the library who receive a salary of $100,000 or more. They are all on board with the system, fully recognizing that the pay issues around lower income employees is pretty significant. Right now, the median pay for the library employees, all library employees included, is $53,000. So half the employees make less than $53,000 a year on average. Half the employees make more than $53,000 an hour on average. The average pay is $60,000. So by doing this roughly with a 4,000 or whatever the amount of money we come up with in the budget, that would increase that median and average pay by an equivalent amount.
That's good. question.
Yeah, I'd love to take some questions, because this is a big part of it, right?
Yeah, Benita, go ahead. You idea.
Just the percentages you're talking about, is that merit pay or cost of living?
It's neither.
Okay.
Right, so for the city of Boulder has used merit pay for years. We skipped merit pay once during the pandemic. And the city of Boulder, in the 10 years that I've been here, has never done a cost of living adjustment, although staff have requested it. So cost of living this year would be 3%. The merit system that the city currently uses and has used for the past 10 years typically is around 3% total. I think our percentage will be higher than that in the initial years. We're proposing looking at something like a 5% increase in the first couple of years in terms of staff, overall staff salaries. The way we divide it, though, would not be a 5% increase on everyone's salary. Because of the idea around pay leveling, it will address the lower income levels. And of course, I mean, if you assume that somebody's at $50,000 a year, and we did roughly that 2 years in a row, then they would be at 58. Obviously, it doesn't fix everything, but it changes that equation somewhat and moves the average income up probably an equivalent amount.
So my recollection is that when you did a comparison to other libraries, you found that our staff was very competitive at the high end and reasonably competitive for entry-level people, but it was the big middle that was behind even other libraries, right?
Yeah, that was my takeaway from a couple of years ago. I think in the analysis that we've done at this point, and we have more to do. We are planning for some kind of comparison compensation study in the next 2 years. But by all accounts, our incoming wage, as well as the wage of all of the frontline staff, exceeds that of, I think, all but Denver Public Library. So higher than Arapahoe, higher than Jeffco, higher than High Plains, higher than Fort Collins. So the wage, it is always a moving target. It has not helped over the past 5 years, 4 years, 5 years of the pandemic that the city, we skipped wage increases 1 year. And then even though there was a high amount of requests for a cost of living increase, while inflation was raging, that never materialized. And so, a cost of living increase this year, if we did a cost of living increase, it would be less than what we're proposing.
And my recollection also is that when the city has done its, whatever it is, biannual classification and comp, library has not fared well in that.
There's a perception. There is a perception amongst. I definitely agree that the class and compensation study was not handled well. The communication on it was lacking the first time that we did it. There was a long lag time where there was no information. And then basically it was plunked down upon the staff, and there was no explanation really for what. There is a concern among staff, and I think warranted, that librarianship as a profession has kind of been grouped along with pink collar workers. So you would think of a female dominated profession. And so even doing the kinds of things that we do in class and comp, which is compare the job to other libraries, inadequately describes the position that they have, right? I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but when you look at hiring for libraries, we still, Boulder still attracts top-notch talent. We still have a selection of top-notch talent for almost every single job that we advertise. So I believe that our salaries are, while low, and certainly low for the library, and certainly not, I believe, what the personnel subcommittee would be say, like, hey, we're super proud of this. a median wage of $53,000 in Boulder is not adequate to live here. And so I think the intention is to move that up. And the intention, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen or Sam, but the intention that was expressed was that we kind of aim for that 75th percentile, not necessarily aiming for the 99th percentile. I think not only probably are we close to there now at 75th, this definitely would get us there to the 75th percentile. The higher, you're correct, right? The higher wage positions in our library are certainly within, the top 10, 15% statewide for libraries. Not remotely close to what you could get in the private sector. So, going along with that, similar lines on pink collar labor. I'd say they're suppressed in that regard, but it's not, but for library work, it's quite good.
Well, it seems like there's always a depression for government jobs. I mean, you never make as much in government as you do in the private sector, no matter what the job is. That's been my.
I think, we will want to revisit compensation again in the next 2 years and do comparative studies. And then I think we'll want to reach back out again to the board and see like where we are. We have a lot of jobs coming up in 2024. It's a lot, right? And I feel fairly confident that we will be competitive in terms of attracting talent. We have jobs across the spectrum, right? So entry-level jobs at NOBO, public service-facing jobs at NOBO, I think will be very competitive. We have other jobs, head of HR, head of facilities. There's a lot of management level jobs which we have not previously had to hire for. We'll have to see if we're competitive in that realm. IT jobs. I mean, there are definitely going to be some IT jobs. The last time we hired one was probably 4 or 5 years ago. We got good talent for that job. We'll see what it's like now. If there's no further questions on compensation or comments, Jen, I'll move on. So the healthcare proposal, we just selected the vendor a few weeks back. They are rapidly closing in on a proposal for us. We'll probably have that in the next 2 weeks. The plan that they're proposing would enable staff to continue with their current healthcare provider, and they would have nothing necessarily specifically change, although we think that we are able to do better with deductibles and especially deductibles for family-related plans, which was a source of complaint, if you remember, in the survey. There are other options in the healthcare plan that will be enhancements for a lot of staff. So as you remember from reading the package, the Boulder Health offers a clinic, which is free to staff and their dependents, should they come into that service. It's a service that we pay for in advance that feasibly could long-term bring our overall health premiums down with a group like Cigna and also offset some costs. But it's not a nothing initial payment. We're paying a significant, not an insignificant amount for that price, with the hopes that enrollment there would both meet the needs of a lot of staff members who are on an income such that they're needing to make decisions about their healthcare. And it's beneficial to go see health. You can get a 90-minute appointment the next day and it's free. I think that will be a benefit to a lot of employees. Much more details on the healthcare plan to be shared the next few weeks. Well, as they described in their proposal, we're looking at a level-funded healthcare program, which part means that you are self-insured up to a point, after which then the insurance company kicks in. So the library district is picking up a portion of all the payouts, pharmaceuticals, visits to the doctor, reports for screening up to a certain point on every individual, and also as an aggregate. And then after a certain point, then it kicks over to the insurance company. But that's the way for us to bring our costs down and actually to increase those things like the high deductible. One of the things that we haven't talked about, but we will be talking about soon, initially with the personnel committee, but then ultimately with the whole group. The city currently contributes funds to health savings accounts, HSAs for staff. It's right now, I believe it's $500 for, it varies between management and union. So it's $500 up to $1,000 for single coverage and $1,000 up to $2,000 for family coverage. I think we probably, in the interest of having a singular focus for all staff, we will propose at least 1,000 for single coverage and 2,000 for family coverage. Obviously, it's a discussion. We'll have to look at the money and get a recommendation from the personnel health committee. Retirement, which is another big concern. Para, we've already made that decision. We're going into para in 2024. And, you know, that is a close to 15% match of the employee's salary for their retirement benefits. So that is a, you know, better than average program. I don't think a lot of employers do 15%. It's mandated by the government. We can't change it to 13 or 12. It's mandated by the state legislature. So 15% is the minimum. And that contribution is for all of our staff employees. So some of the other stuff that I want to talk about is in the employee benefits is to the extent that we can, we are broadening the definition of family. So the definition of family for the use of sick leave is and bereavement leave and a number of different leaves like that. It's significantly broadened from the state definition and significantly broadened from what the city definition is. And it really kind of extends to any person who is a close personal associate who has a significant emotional, psychological, or financial support to the employee. And that, for those who ask the question, does that extend to a pet? Indeed, it does. So it extends also to a pet. There are obviously way more situations wherein staff would be eligible to use paid sick leave. Those will be forthcoming to you in the handbook. It's an extensive list that allows staff to use sick where previously they've either been denied sick and had to use their vacation time or otherwise it was just denied. Paid vacation is what we currently have. We're replacing it with what we're going to call paid time off because the definition, you can use it however you want. You can use it if you're sick. You can use it if you're for a vacation. You can use it for planned trips. You can use short-term notice. But the planned time off, the vacation time, is essentially where we increase that amount significantly. Additional paid and unpaid leaves, I'll cover in a later slide. So to get to the time off, the paid PTO, we're proposing that staff from the start get 4 weeks of paid vacation. After they've reached a milestone of 5 years, they get 5 weeks of paid vacation. After they've reached a milestone of 15 years, they get 6 weeks of paid vacation. Now, in comparison to the city of Boulder, that is better than in all categories of BMEA and or union. It's not detailed on the plan, but you know, as you factor in a plan that says like we want the best thing that we can provide for all employees, and we want the best thing that we can provide for employees as they start in the organization, inevitably not everything is better, right? So employees who have been with the organization in a management level position for, I believe, 20 years, actually will see a slight decrease in the amount of time that they are given off. The accrual rate is, I think, a day or two less per year. Not significant, but not nothing either. So that's the only place where we say when we're trying to improve the package, there are places where it does come back. That amount of paid time off is equivalent to all of our competitive libraries and much more in line with Denver Public Library, which is a city of Denver, city and county of Denver organization. It's an improvement upon the city's plans up until 20 years of service and better than High Plains, Poudre River, Douglas County, Estes Park Library. It's an equivalent program also to CU, although it's better at the outset than it is for CU. Or no, a CU starts out at the same amount. Ours improves over the course of time. So paid time off, if you remember, right? Paid time off is cash, right? It is worth cash. At any time you would leave the organization, you would be paid out in full the cash benefit of that time that you had accrued. We're moving the accrual levels up to 320. They're currently 320 for management, but currently 240 for BMEA. So everybody's will be 320. Then we get to sick leave. So sick leave is something that staff requested, and in this case, what we're proposing is a reduction in sick leave to offset the increase in vacation time. So sick leave, city staff currently receive 112 hours of sick leave per year. That's for BMEA and for management, and it doesn't matter how long you've been here. It's 112 hours per year. We're proposing more in line with the state mandated guidelines and in line with the data that we have on how leave is used, 60 hours. So you would get that 60 hours at the beginning of each year. You would use it however you would like. When it's exhausted, you would be eligible for a number of different leave pools. Short-term disability is one. We have proposed a leave bank, a shared leave bank, which employees could also draw upon for, I believe, up to 3 weeks at a time if they have an illness or injury that requires extended care, but they don't necessarily qualify for short-term disability. And then there's also a compassionate leave program, which offers also an extended paid time for leave around a number of different purposes, which you'll be able to read about fully in the plan, but it's extends to family members in the broad definition of it, and allows for time, if documented and approved through HR, that they can take an extended period of time there as well. So sick time, as you well know, it has no cash value. The way the city currently does it is you have an unlimited accrual of sick leave. And so what you saw in the very first meeting were a number of questions around like, what happens to all my accrued sick leave? The proposal that we have is that your hours will not carry over from year to year, but rather the unused hours that you would have at the end of each year would revert to the bank, the shared bank, from which all employees could draw. So the way the city currently does this when a person exhausts all their sick leave, and this happens occasionally on people who have an extended illness. I hate to say it, but I can't think of a better way. It's like a popularity contest, right? So they can request time. It goes through myself. I then put out the request in their name, and employees can donate paid vacation time to a pool from which that employee can draw. Having done it a couple of times since I've been here, it is very inconsistent what types of donations come into that. This plan moves away from that. It is by no means a popularity contest. Any and all staff who qualify would be eligible for it, and they can draw on it for multiple periods of time. But the initial draw could be at minimum up to 22 days. So that's the start. They could get 22 days of paid leave out of the sick leave bank.
Mathematical question about that. So from what you've said, there hasn't been a lot of use of sick leave hours by employees. So if everything rolls over, does that just keep going big and big? Does that become a bigger liability for us, or do we cap that?
No, the bank, you mean that bank? Honestly, the money itself, it doesn't represent money. It's not cash, right? So sick leave is a benefit. And to be totally truthful with you, I don't even know how we talk about this with the staff, but the administration of such a thing is a nightmare. And so like short-term disability, if you've ever been in a position where it's self-insured, right? So you're paying, when somebody goes on short-term disability, you just pay it, right? Like you pay that amount, the employer pays that amount up until the point where the person gets off short-term disability. No, an insurance company has to approve of it, but ultimately the library itself is the bank and pays those hours out by hiring another person to fill that person's time, that person's slot in the short-term disability. This thing would operate in a similar way. So it is like a supplemental disability plan or for short-term and long-term illness that would be eligible for employees, because I have done quite a lot of analysis of the use of leave in the library. It's fascinating. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. It almost never changes is the shocking thing. So fully half the staff use less on a yearly basis. This year it's less than 45 hours a year. So we're on pace for more than half the staff will use less than 45 hours individually a year. So
Of sick leave.
of sick leave in a typical year, that 50% mark represents about 10 to 11% of all the sick leave that's taken in a library. Then there's another 25% that maybe represents another 20%, 15 to 20%. And then once you get into the higher, the people who are actually sick, it's the top 10% of utilizers of sick leave use about 35% of all the sick leave that's taken within the library on a year-to-year basis. The people are different, but on a year-to-year basis, it's the top 10%, which in our case is 8 people, use roughly 30 to 35% of all the sick leave that's taken through the year. And so is there another way to address that other than simply blanket throwing 122 hours or 112 hours at everybody a year? And it's a calculation, right? So the way the cities, and I don't begrudge this, right? The way the city's calculation works is they offer unlimited accrual of sick leave. Yet in order to qualify for short-term or long-term disability, you have to exhaust all of your leave. So in some cases, they could be out sick on sick leave for a period of time if it's approved before they would ever even qualify for consideration of short-term disability. Our plan is very different. Like you qualify for short-term disability within a week, can go on that plan. You don't have to exhaust your vacation leave. You don't have to exhaust what sick leave you have. You can go on short-term disability and stay on that plan for up to 6 months without exhausting that leave. And that's more common, I think, with how most systems work. The city's system of unlimited accrual of sick time and the exhaustion of both sick and vacation to qualify for eligibility on short-term disability is an anomaly. I can find no other organization that does anything like it. And I think it's a form of self-insurance, right? You take the thing and you put the bank of insurance on individual employees so that they can then bank up time if they have to go on short-term. They can use their sick time. There's no cost to the city, other than paying their time. And then you can also then avoid having to pay the cost through short-term disability and or even necessarily getting the premiums. But the city does currently have the premiums for short and long-term disability. But at the time in which they allowed for unlimited accrual, they didn't even have those plans. Those plans were not in existence at the time for the city employees. So it is a kind of a balance. And we're assuming that there are 3 to 5 people who get sick, an injury or surgery or something like that in a group of 100 every single year. I guarantee it. I more or less think we can bank on 3 to 5 people a year using short-term disability. Probably another 5 or so who apply to use leave from the bank for an unexpected illness of a family member or a child or whatever it happens to be, or themselves. And so I think that people will draw upon the bank. It's my expectation that leave usage won't necessarily change. It's just the manner in which the organization addresses it is more of a collective response rather than putting that responsibility on individuals. Because if somebody does have a prolonged illness, they're in that boat for 2 or 3 years, right? Like it's not a one and done. And so you're in this kind of safe place for 2 or 3 years. And I think no amount of accumulated sick leave is going to get you past that. And it doesn't necessarily replenish that at a faster rate. I mean, that is a major change for the organization, as is the compensation and separating pay from performance. We're basically giving everyone a raise but those are the 2 major changes I think that we will see. So other things that are in the package that you'll see.
Before you go off of that.
Yeah, please.
The preview of coming attractions. Have you taken a look at our package relative to FAM? Because I know we're going to be looking at whether to opt out of the family leave act after we have
As far as I understand it, our package is way better.
Yeah. Now,
So I think, by opting out of family, FML, it doesn't mean that staff wouldn't be able to avail themselves of it, right? So they could avail themselves through the state program and actually take advantage of family. It's just not that we're not paying premiums on it in the year in advance of actually going. The other part of the sick leave thing is that, as you remember from the meeting that we had and read through the survey, there are a number of people who are concerned with what happens with their accrued sick leave. And just to be totally honest, there are close to 24,000 hours of accrued sick leave that City of Boulder library employees have. It has a total, if it were cash, and it is not cash, it has a value of about $750,000. And so what we're proposing and discussing with personnel subcommittee has asked me to do to put together a proposal about what it would look like to allow staff with accrued sick time to convert that percentage of that sick time into vacation time with the district. And so I've priced out for them 10%, 15%, and 20% for them to take a look at. It's not a cash payout. It's more like we transfer a percentage of their accrued sick leave balance, which had no cash value, into a benefit in the new system, basically vacation time.
Right.
That they would be able to draw upon in the future. And so we'll have a discussion about that tomorrow and come back to you with a recommendation. I think that idea, while there's no immediate payout for us, and certainly it's not something that's expected by staff, I think it will go a long way to assuage a lot of people who have a lot of hours. I think I counted at least 12 employees have more than 500 hours of accrued sick leave, which would mean that like those people will start out in the new district with at least a week and something. We can change, a week and a day or so of accrued vacation. They'll have vacation time from the outset, whether they choose to pass over the vacation time from the city or not.
So if you do that, how would that then work with the carryover?
Well, so the carryover that we're proposing, it's all or nothing, right? Again, administrative nightmare. So if somebody chooses to take the payout from the city and hand the check over to the library district, as I believe you guys are proposing, we would honor their entire bank of vacation leave. So it'll be less than their current accrued vacation, because the city will deduct tax. And at least as far as we're proposing, they're going to get a wage increase at the beginning of the year, reflective of this pay leveling system. But we would just take the last pay period, the accrued amount of vacation that they have. If they turn over the check, we'll give them that many of hours. For those people who have already accrued, who are transferring sick leave into accrued vacation time, they may make the determination for themselves that it makes more sense for them to cash out the check from the city and not transfer that money over to the library district.
I'm sorry, I wasn't being clear. So they can accrue up to 320 hours in a year.
That's correct.
So my question is, how does this affect that first year? Some people are going to have a lot of hours. Will they lose all of that in that year if they don't use it? I mean,
There's one employee. So there's one employee who, if we decide to do 20%, it will affect that employee. They will lose time simply in the transfer. There's only one. Of all the rest, whether 10, 15, or 20%, whatever we decide to recommend, they will be able to carry those hours over and then feasibly cash the check that the city gives them for the payout from the city and have enough vacation time to do whatever they want for a full year. Yeah, and so once it's kind of all or nothing, right? You get the check from the city, you either turn it over and you can get all of your vacation time that you previously had from the city. At which point then we do have a policy where you can buy back 40 hours. So you can buy back a week. But we don't want to get into a situation where somebody says like, here's my check. I want 5 days in cash and 3 days in vacation, because that'll be an administrative nightmare again. So it's all or nothing. They can utilize the payback system for paying back 40 hours of accrued vacation time to get a cash payout at some point. But for those employees who would be transferring sick leave, accrued sick leave, to vacation, I think some of them will make the decision that, like, for some of them it's 8 hours, some of them it's 4, some of them it's 40. You know, what is it they want, right? Because then starting out with the district on January 1st, it could be enough that you have 40 hours. You're going to start accruing leave at a rate of higher than what you currently do. And so some of them may think that's fine. Some of them, others may think like, no, I want to take over the 2 weeks that I have stored from the city and then have 3 weeks of accrued of a balance of vacation leave from day one with the district. So I think it will all work out. So briefly, number of other things in the benefits package, and thanks for,
We leave that.
yeah, please.
Can you talk about how you see it working when employees get that cash out? There's the withholding of tax, right? So actually, it's not like a dollar for dollar, but will there dollar by more in the library? When
We're not going to do it that way. If they choose to turn over the whole check,
Uh-huh.
we will honor whatever the balance they had in their vacation time at the end of their time with the city. So, if you have whatever, 100 hours of vacation time on the last day of employment with the city, they're going to pay you out for 100 hours. The check that you will get will be minus the taxes they're taking on that payout. But if you turn over that check to the library district will give you.
That's a bonus.
Yeah.
Well, otherwise it would mean that we're taxing them twice. Essentially, because they will pay a tax on whatever payout and utilization of the vacation leave. They would utilize it at the rate of pay of tax deduction on it. So they would be taxed twice. And I think the only way to avoid that is to honor the hours that they have
I see that.
turning over the check.
Okay.
So briefly, the rest of the menu, and it is it's a 37-page benefits package. This does not include healthcare. It includes a lot of different stuff. And it's pretty extensive, but just to touch on some highlights, there are a minimum of 11 paid holidays a year. That's consistent with what we do with the city. There are 3 floating holidays, also consistent with the city. Medical leave, FMLA is available. Compassionate leave, which is an extension kind of an emergency leave, bereavement leave, an injured family member, a sick family member that would allow for extended leaves. There's paid parental leave for 12 weeks. There is a paid grandparental leave. So if a person is having a grandparent is having a grandchild, you can get paid leave for a week, a year. There is paid pet adoption leave for at least a period once in your career. So you're adopting a pet and you need to take some time off to acclimatize that pet to your organization. You get paid leave, military service leave, obviously, and a leave plan for people who are victims of abuse or any kind of crime. The amount of PTO, which has a cash value, is better in the case in almost every single case, with the exception of management who've been here for longer than 20 years. So that is something to keep in mind. The total amount of leave, sick and vacation time is not the same, right? But there are then these extended leaves with leave bank, compassionate leave, and all these different things. So it is the amount of leave that has a cash payout.
Good evening. The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
Overall leave.
Buenas noches. La biblioteca se cerrará en 15 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
It sounds to me like individual leave is one thing, but then the safety net around that is much better.
Individual leave is going up significantly across the board for employees who are currently hourly union staff. That is from top to bottom. Their leave time will improve. It is true of employees in their first 10 to 15 years of employment with management. After 15 years of employment, if you've been employed 15 years as management, then there's kind of beginning to be an imbalance in terms of the total number of hours. Still, the cash balance, what value it has in terms of a cash value, is still higher up until the point you reach. If you have been here 20 years with management, there is the potential by 1 or 2 days for the cash value of whatever leave you are earning on a yearly basis to be like a slightly higher than what you would earn with the district. But that is the one exception.
It would be helpful, because Jennifer did these comp for me and Jen, just it was helpful to me thinking this through, like where are we landing compared to like yours? I assume we could send that to all the trustees, right? Or
Yeah, I was going to provide it for you in your packet next week. We'll provide it to the staff on request. We'll have it as kind of a back pocket slide. We folded it into the slide presentation that I will give you next week in your packet to look at. And that is the slide presentation that we'll be giving to the staff on September 12th. So it's, what it doesn't show is like, we have 3 tiers. You start to work, you've been here 5 years, you've been here 15 years. Currently BMEA, I think, has 9 steps. Management has 6. If you look at a library like High Plains, they must have about 25 to 30 different grades. A lot of places put a lot of steps in place in terms of like, You've been here a year, now it changes. You've been here 2 years, now it changes. You've been here 3, 5, whatever. There's a number by which you reach to get further. Our plan is as good as it can be from day one. And that is fully recognizing that the contribution that we get from employees from day one is what they can give us, right? Like it is everything they can give. And frankly, next year, we are going to be recruiting for probably around 40 positions, many of which are positions that we've never hired for. And we've never been in that market for IT professionals, for HR professionals, for facilities professionals. And we need to have a package that is competitive and attractive. And so it is heavily, it is geared to be good from the get-go. There's no milestone you reach that suddenly then now the benefits package is good. And it's funny saying that because I'm just now reaching my 10-year milestone with the city where my benefits really start to get good. But they weren't when I started. I was like, this isn't great. So for BMEA on a starting basis in the first 5 years, it almost doubles the amount of vacation time that they get, right? So, and in terms of the overall leave that they get, it is a 25 to 30% kick, right? It's big. It is not insignificant. It kind of progressively goes down from there, but that group, entry level, frontline staff, will see an enormous difference in there. And even after, I think the starting benefits are about what you get to in BMEA after 15 years. So, and that's with intention. We did that. We designed that program. If you want the benefits package to be the same for everyone, and you want to do the best that you can from the day you start, there are trade-offs. And so I think those trade-offs will be clear to you, but we've put together as good a package as we possibly can, I believe. At this point.
As you talk about it, I think it's a little bit misleading to say things will go down after 10 or 15 years because you still have that bigger base. So if I'm understanding it correctly, I mean, I'm going to be taking advantage of more leave, more benefits from day one. And it's just the rate of that improvement slows down, but I still am starting at a much bigger base than I would have had under the honor system. And I mean,
The library will be closing in 10 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, Johnny.
La biblioteca se cerrará en 10 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
Yeah, because if you were to start with the library district on January 1, the amount of time that you will earn in leave in 20 years is significantly higher, I think, than what, I mean, it is at least marginally higher than what you could have earned with the city going through all the steps, going up the various.
your career time accrual is going to be higher
Absolutely.
than it would have been under a system where it gets better as you go along. Yeah, and I'm used to a system where you don't even get benefits. You're sort of on probation the first 6 months or the first year, and so yeah. But just how you present it, I think it's.
So the last thing is that the personnel subcommittee, and I realize we're not all here tonight, and two of the personnel subcommittee are. I don't know that we need a vote, but I think rightfully the personnel subcommittee asked if we could announce again the broad outlines of what the compensation package would be, and potentially the broad outlines of the sick leave accrual conversion to vacation time by the September 12th announcement when we put out the entire handbook. And so is that a comfort level that the board has? I feel pretty confident that I don't know what the dollar amount's going to be right now, but I don't know what the percentage of accrued leave is going to be right now, but I think we may know by 10 days from now.
Could we just hear Jen and Sam pitch their?
And I think it's pretty important that Doug and Kara and Sylvia watch what you just presented. Because I really would hope for, unanimous support on this critical. I mean, the bottom line for me is, the approach we're taking to pay with pay leveling, and thank you, senior leadership, for supporting that. The COLA direction, given the inflationary times, is the right direction for pay. And the benefit package, as you heard David say, increases overall leave. Maybe there's a few people with a lot of sick leave who might wince at one particular aspect of it, but it's really great whether you've been here 15 years or whether you're starting out. So we're sending a message that we've made our staff top priority in crafting the best pay and benefits package we can. I mean, that's kind of the top line for me, Benita. And if, you know, if asked, that's the message I want to deliver to the public. It's a message I want to deliver to individual employees who might, you know, respond in some way at the listening session that Jen and I are gonna attend. That we feel like David and Jennifer and the staffing subcommittee have put together, I think, the best possible package that we can. And that to me is testament to what's the most important thing as we make this transition to the library district, the team, the people. Sorry, that sounded like a little pitch speech, but I thought
Great.
that. Yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted to hear from you, Jen.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add to what Sam said. You know, I think Sam and I have really been stress testing this with David in our meetings over the weeks around making sure that we do them, you know, kind of create the most competitive package we can put together without hobbling any of our ability to kind of make good on our ballot promises and, you know, and make sure that it's budget friendly and so on. So I think, you know, Sam and I joined the staffing committee because for us, the staff is sort of the most important part of what we're inheriting. I mean, we're inheriting buildings and assets and all sorts of other things, but I think for us, it sends a message that we're really taking care of everybody. And I think that's really important.
Staff that makes the library, it's not the building.
Yep. So I had a couple of questions. So one has to do with just the trends that I know about in workforce and these next generations that follow me in the public sector that don't necessarily stay in jobs and positions for 10 to 20 years. So in what you've put together, what thought did you give to, you know, the fact that a career may be 4 years, 5 years of an employee?
The library will be closing in 5 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
La biblioteca se cerrará en 5 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
And the longest time I've ever been in a job is 9 years. So I just didn't want you to think like I was like, I'm too old. Anyway, so what's your thinking on that? I mean, in terms of like being competitive and, you know, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the longest I have ever been at an organization is 4 years, just so my library trusteeship will be the longest thing I've ever done, just in case anybody was sort of benchmarking. I mean, I think some of what David said around making sure a lot of this takes effect from day one is part of, I think, what will attract talent. I mean, definitely one of the things we've talked about with the various insurance brokers that we chatted to was the different personas along the different types of employee personas that you encounter along the experience range, right? Forgive me, Benita, by the way, I'm a little bit sick. So, you know, you have your early in their career folks who are perhaps more focused on compensation and professional development and less on benefits. And then someone who's been in the workforce for 20 years, who's more concerned about taking care of their family, health benefits, and so on, right? And so so that's one thing that we're thinking about as the package gets put together. I think we've also talked a lot about putting funds towards professional development and things that people who are earlier in their career care about. But as far as what David has talked about today, I think this sort of like take effect from day one piece has been a really important part of his proposal to us.
And my understanding of, even though we had to go all in with para, there are also options for additional retirement contributions, right? And we haven't had a lot of time on staffing subcommittee to talk about the professional development piece, but I do think that's obviously going to be key in it, particularly attracting new talent or sort of, you know, early mid talent. I mean, David, you have talked about it, but it's not one.
Yeah, so I mean, it's,
Dollars to it or anything like that.
yeah, well, we have, you'll see it in the budget, right? So we have, you know, we've, the proposal that you're gonna see, right? Like, so it acknowledges like, what are the key components for every single staff member that walks through the door? And so after alignment, right? They want to work at a library, at least initially, that is their impulse. It is really compensation, healthcare, retirement, vacation time, and development, right? Those are the key things. And so in all of those cases, like para they chose, right? So we stuck with para. Para does have is healthier than it was 5 years ago. They've changed. They have a defined contribution plan. So you can basically put in what it is you want to ever take out and you keep it no matter what. You don't have to become vested in 5 years and all these other kind of things. So there is that component. That was probably initially what I thought was the weakest component of exactly what you're talking about, because you're exactly right. Like there are a lot of employees who find their way to libraries who it seems like to me, I'm thinking like, what's their long-term professional commitment, right? Like they're here for 4 or 5 years because it's a good gig. They like the place. It's a cool job and they may be moving on. And so the retirement was the weakest link, but I think the defined contribution plan gives them opportunities. It's kind of like, you know, it's almost like a 401k, like they can cash it out at whatever point they want and they don't have to stay in para for a long period of time.
Well, and with para, there's the portability too. If they go to another.
Well, but the unfortunate thing about portability is you just need to go online and look at who the other para, state of Colorado para institutions are. And there are only about 2 other libraries in the state that do para. Estes Park is one of them, but otherwise, I think it's only Douglas County and maybe 1 or 2 others. You have the opportunity of going to school districts.
Right, you could be a librarian.
In a school district. So school districts are uniformly, you know, I think predominantly in para, but outside of that, there's not much there.
There's the whole state system. I mean.
Well, it's the state system if you look at who the enrolled members are, which you can look at on Para's website, there's not a lot of clear cross.
There could be other government jobs.
Yeah, other government.
Exactly. I mean, public sector, the portability, being in a library are gonna have skills that can be sold in a lot of different government kind of things. I mean, I'm just thinking of.
Attention, the library is now closed. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again.
So the other reality is that we have to have one.
Atención, la biblioteca está cerrada. Gracias por acompañarnos hoy y esperamos verlos nuevamente.
So I'm thinking a ladder and 4 screwdrivers, or a screwdriver for 4 screws.
So when you start at the organization and up until a couple of years, if you're a BMEA or a management employee, you get 2 weeks of vacation, 2 weeks and 2 days, or 2 weeks and a day, I think. We're increasing that to 4 weeks from the outset. That's a big change. So that's the time off consideration. And as far as professional development, we have a number of things in the handbook that we're taking out at the recommendation of both the staffing subcommittee, and we'll develop them as a process because they're not fully baked yet. But as far as the budget is concerned, you'll see a 4-fold increase in the amount of money that we're putting into staff development. So it is a significant increase in funding developed to the program for staff development because of the importance of it. And we recognize that importance. And we don't have a fully baked plan yet. So it's one of those things I think we're going to partially be inventing while we fly the plane. There will be adequate funding there to send people to conferences. The issue that we faced in a system of constraints and frugality over the number of years is that most staff do not avail themselves even of opportunities that we currently have because they're afraid to leave their coworkers in the lurch, right? They choose not to go to a 3-day conference because they're afraid that like subs won't be able to backfill their shifts, and their coworkers are going to be left with holding the bag. And so that is a bigger issue, which we have to address. And I think you'll see that in the budget as well by returning to staffing levels that we had prior to the pandemic. So
Yeah, that's got to be driven by the fact that there hasn't been enough staff to do coverage.
even prior to it, it was a challenge for us, but I think we have a plan to at least address it. And then we have the flexibility, I believe, in the new budget to add additional funding for the sub budget. And also then increasing the entry level wage for substitutes. which has been at the same place for years, we may be able to get more sub-help to help offset that cost, but we have to.
David, it went up with the rest of the compensation. It's equal to that of their comparable position. So like materials handler substitute make the same as regular standard material.
Okay. So it is a culture change, right? We have to get out of a mindset of being frugal and living in an environment of scarcity where any opportunity that you have to go away from to doing something that would actually benefit yourself or your career is in some ways, self-edited or discouraged because we're afraid of what coverage might look like. And so I think that is a long-term leap. Obviously, you can quadruple the budget, but that is not change management. It helps, but it's not going to get the change management done. That's going to be an ongoing process where we have to redevote ourselves to sending people to conferences and training and allowing for a broader definition. You'll see that in the plan as well. So the benefits plan does offer extended leave, not paid, but extended leave for staff to avail themselves of educational opportunities and take a class, learn Italian, whatever it is they want to do. They can take extended leaves of time or extend a paid vacation leave for a period of time in order to accomplish a personal career or educational goal.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
Has to do with the holiday pay and the holidays that are listed. How does a policy like this or something that's in the handbook affect the possibility that somewhere down the line, we may decide that the library could be open on whatever, a given holiday, Martin Luther King Day, and, have, just regular hours and it not be a holiday just because it's a city holiday. And it could be a day to embrace reading in a big way or something. I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, I've always wondered about why the library follows the city policy of being closed when it's a day that people would welcome an opportunity to go to the library and read.
It'll be something that you guys vote on every year.
But
So
it
we'll bring it.
doesn't in the handbook, then, is it phrased in a way that these are the definite given holidays that people will have off, or does it say?
We list we
Caveats.
list the exact same holidays that the city currently has in the current handbook, but we are fully aware of the fact that we need you guys to weigh in on it. So it is, we are listing 11 paid holidays and 3 floating holidays. So what the city has always done is you had 3 floating personal days. We're moving the 3 floating personal days to 3 holidays in recognition of the fact that not everybody celebrates the same holidays.
So can I reframe Benita's question? Because I think what she's asking is, so when I worked in retail sales, we worked on Christmas Eve, right? So is there an argument to be made for the library to be open on some of the holidays that the city now takes as holidays? Are other libraries open? Do they see traffic on that?
Oh, we're dead. So we are open on days that are not city holidays. Easter is a good example. It's a dead day here. I mean, you'll look at the date and you'll think this isn't worth keeping the doors open, but in some cases we do. There are probably other days that are accorded holiday status where maybe we would have more traffic in the library than we would on days where we're open and there isn't a holiday, but we can look at that. I mean, we can show you most of the.
All I wanted to That's do what is you're- like to that's just what you're make sure,
asking.
yeah, like that the handbook sort of reflects the flexibility of that.
Well, I don't
In
think
some
the
way.
handbook's reflecting the flexibility.
Okay.
The handbook is saying the holidays are the holidays.
And these are
So
the
I
days you
think-
have off.
Yeah. And so I think if that's something the board wants to look at in the future, you should ask staff to say, does it make sense to be open on Labor Day or whatever?
Yeah, I think we'll bring it
Right
back.
now, I think Labor Day is the Boulder Creek Festival, so you can't be open anyway.
Currently, if a city employee works on the observed holiday, they get holiday double pay.
Yeah, I got time and a half.
And that isn't clear in the handbook. If
Is not?
It is not. If
So
that's
should it
something
be?
we want to do, yeah, we should probably.
But why would they be working if we're not open?
If you were to change the dates.
Yeah, so.
So if you were to change the
They had
dates from a
work For
federally-
whatever reason.
Yes, no, I
Really
understand that, but I don't think we're proposing to change the dates now. are we?
No.
No,
So I think the handbook is fine as it is. I'm hearing in future, you might want to look at whether it makes sense to be open on certain holidays, at which point you'd need to update the handbook to deal with paying people on those.
So I just wondered if the handbook has a statement that reflects that these are established, you know, I don't know, that they're subject to change based on,
Yeah, we added the dates, we added the days actually in at the last minute to reflect exactly what the city does. Now, that we initially had just said like there's 11 paid holidays with 3 floating holidays, like we didn't specify what they were, but we changed it, but we can always move it around. I mean, it does reflect a couple of Christian holidays, which, you know, I don't know. That is something that we'll have to talk about and decide whether we want to do those or not. I think we could use data that we have previously collected because we, you know, and we have data from Christian holidays where we're open, that turned out to be like, there's not a very good argument for us to be open if you're looking at bodies through the door, at door count to justify it's Easter opening. Easter, yeah, that's a weird one for us. It also falls like in the spring, so it's like people being away. I think they use it as a tie into getting other time, but you know, we can look at those days and certainly we'll.
I just wondered, I mean, just think about Martin Luther King Day and Juneteenth. There's like 2 days that,
Well, I was thinking about, I'm pretty sure I've been to a thing at the auditorium on Martin Luther King Day where, but so some individual staff were paid to come in and, yeah.
use the facility. Okay. Anyway, I just thought like there should be some statement there about these are at present the holidays that,
Well, I think that would
Recommend.
introduce ambiguity at this point. I would really
Okay.
recommend staying with what we have. And then if that's something you guys are interested in looking at next year or whatever after we get started, then reopen it because the handbook can be changed, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Once you're there, I think it's always good not to introduce ambiguity for people. It just raises the fear level. That's my own experience. If you think it makes sense to add something that says if you have to work, you know, because we might have the Canyon Theater open or something like that, then you should definitely put that in.
Handbook is a flexible document. I mean, we fully recognize that some things are gonna probably changed in the first year or two. You know, we don't print a book anymore and hand somebody a book on their first day. It's online. So it's like,
Yeah.
it will be indexed and you can click from section to section.
I think that'd be an
Should things
interesting,
change over the course of time?
would be an interesting analysis to do, is to see if it makes sense to be open on other days and if other libraries do that. I don't. So to go back to your question about whether you should share this with staff on September 12th, I think absolutely yes, you should. It's good information. I think your reason as well, it's well thought through and it's already been shared because these are librarians, right? They're going to be reading our minutes and they're going to read everything we talked about tonight. So yes, I think.
but you're talking about too, sharing it in advance of the meeting on the 12th.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you should consider it shared.
Yeah.
And to be clear,
Good
we're
work.
talking about pay leveling and some percentage of accrued sick leave carrying over as a conversion to vacation time.
As much as you guys are comfortable sharing at this point. I think that'd be great. Openness is good. Transparency is good. But I do think you ought to think about how you present it, because some of the ways you were talking about it tonight, David, I think were a little confusing and in some cases didn't accurately reflect benefit of the program. So you might want to do some, I see Jennifer nodding, so do some, you know, coaching or whatever around that.
The rate of increase slows rather than this goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, language like that. Yeah.
And over the course of careers, you're actually getting much better accrual than you would have, you know, overall.
I've no doubt, like Sam, that it is the best package that we could possibly offer. And that it is a vast improvement upon what staff currently have, and 95%.
That's, you need to be done.
I unfortunately have had the opportunity to speak to the 5 or 6% who don't believe that to be the case. And so I'm cognizant of that level of resistance and dissatisfaction. And you know, it's hard.
Focus on the sick leave discussion.
Yes, primarily. And so, you know, I don't assume, I don't want you to assume, I am not assuming because I've spoken to them, you know, many of them personally or heard their questions thrown at me in a meeting, that this is not all like, you know, gravy and cake, right? There will be a percentage of the organization, and I cannot predict for you what that is, but I would guess between 10 and 20% who are going to be focused on what they are losing, and you are going to hear about it. And so what is it you want to do with that? I didn't spend 8, 9 months of research to put this thing together, to put together a package with it, which I thought was going to be bad.
Yeah.
We put together the best package that we thought we could. There's probably some minor flexibility in it. But I think you would have to consider those with deep consideration because, we've pushed the limits on where we can go in a lot of different areas.
No, and I think it's great work by all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Jen and Sam, for all the time and thought you've put into this. And for me, your hearts are in exactly the right place. I mean, taking care of staff has got to be the number one thing. They're the ones that make the library what it is.
From a work level, from a emotional level, and from a cost perspective, right? So this is the thing you guys will have to deal with over and over and over and over again, is every single thing that we choose to do, 60% of the cost is staffing. And that's like, whatever you decide to do, you want to do a big program about such and such, just assume that 60% of the costs are going to go into that. It's going to be paying somebody to do it for you. And so that's kind of the nature of the beast.
For most entities, right? Whether
Yeah.
we're private, government, nonprofit.
Yeah.
You're
Certainly in the service industry, it is heavily skewed.
Buildings are next, but they don't give feedback.
Yeah, they don't. A few last quick things in my report. The financial software package is not ready to go. We're still interviewing, doing demos with a couple of different companies. And the broad policy on public comment was requested last week, and so you have a sample of it in front of you, should you choose to do it. This is what the Library Commission approved several years ago. Been effective, I think, but you guys, you weren't there when they passed. Yes, you were there when they passed it, I think. Still, when they passed the public comment thing, maybe not. But Eden's definitely.
I think they were, I was there when they did one. I don't think this is the one that was there when I did it, but yeah. So yeah, Jen and Doug both weighed in and said they thought it was fine. I haven't heard anything from Sylvia. It looks like you've been marking it up.
Yeah, I just don't like the throw in of the second person, the reference to you should do this or you can expect that. So I changed it to all, so it's consistent with like third person. And so I made those changes.
So substantively, it's fine. You've got some editorial reframing. Yeah, which is fine. Sam, did you have any?
No, I think it's fine. I think we should give it a try. I mean, it's slightly different from the school district, but that larger entity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wondered about the role of the secretary, if the secretary is prepared to take on the role of receiving signups and then.
Put that out for you.
I think that, well, I
Okay.
would imagine we're going to be doing the same thing that we did as commission with once Celia is on board, Celia will be effectively doing that. So she's working with whoever the secretary treasurer is. And that may be something we want to address directly.
Yeah, we'll put out the sign up list for you.
So if you want to just, maybe, I think you've made notes on the back of that. If you want to
Mhm.
scan that, send it to me with Sylvia and we can get it
Okay.
revised and then bring it back next week for passage.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Thanks for entertaining that. That was a long director's report. We'll have a few of those in the month of September because we're in the point right now where everybody's drinking from a fire hose, and these are big, important decisions. These are $1 million decisions, each one, like the staffing component, the healthcare component. Those are all coming down the pike this month.
Pillars of the new organization.
Yep.
Okay, subcommittee updates. I can give a facilities subcommittee update. We finally got to meet with the facilities folks last week, and it was a great meeting. They're very helpful. They gave us a lot of information. They gave us costs. We talked about the costs. The costs are in line with what David and Jen have been building into the budget. They are even maybe have a little bit of padding in there, which is great. We went over some of the buildings and they were very good with suggestions and questions. And to me, the best news were the things I heard about parts of our software systems that are not part of IT. So, for example, the asset system here, that's what controls the doors and the key cards for employees. That's facilities, and they say they can just carve that off for our buildings and hand it over to us, which is great. We have to buy cards, but that means that's an easy one. Similarly, the building automation system, which is what operates all the mechanical and electrical equipment, They said they can also carve that off, and when we get our head up, they can just load that in. And they have an asset management system, which is relatively new. And that's what they're using to track the state of all the components of the buildings. So, you know, what needs to be fixed when, how old things are, all those kinds of things. And that also, it sounds like they can carve us out and then just port it over. And we should be able to take the information we got from the Cummings report, that was the facility report that was just done, and merge that with there, so we've got a good prioritization system. So that was all great. It sounds like that part of the transition can be handled pretty easily. There was some conversation about the plans for staffing and what kind of skills should be there in the group with facilities. I think David and Dan are thinking of a manager and then 3 people working for them right now, 3 or 4.
Well, 3-day porters and possibly 3 generalists.
Yeah, so
So
we talked
6.
about when you should focus on internal, what sort of things you should have your internal staff, and when you go to contractors. So the costs that they're sharing, they had one set for internal costs, which is all people who are working for the city, including our day porters. And then there's a level above it who are generalists, people who can do, you know, basic carpentry, basic electrical, that sort of stuff. And then if it reaches a certain level, then they call in outside contractors. And they have a number of contractors effectively on retainer. Those contracts also, it looks like, can be passed over to us, carved out in the case of the day porters. And they're providing all that information to David. Antonia Gona is wanting to be the person who's going to be the facilities manager on all of this. She's already learning asset management and I think the BIS system. So that all seems to be working pretty well. And we did get confirmed that the city council will be taking up the question of ownership of the building on September 7th. Kim is planning to be at the meeting. I'll also plan to be at the meeting in case there are questions. They're also going to be, I think, taking up the appointment process at that meeting. I don't know where it is in the agenda yet, if it's a matter from city manager or, yeah. So hopefully that will be something that will be relatively quick, but you never know. So that's facilities. Anything else for subcommittees? So trustee matters, I sent around to everybody the updated version of the advanced agenda planning. And I proposed here some dates in October that we not meet, because we said we wanted to start tailing off meeting every week in late October. I heard back from Jen that this looks fine. I also added a couple of items that we had discussed. So there's some new things on the agenda. One other thing I'll mention that I mentioned to David today. So JLF, as you know, is here September 22nd and 23rd. The Teamwork Arts team will be in the library setting everything up at our meeting on the 19th. And I have suggested to them that the core people come by and introduce themselves to everybody, since I think you guys haven't met them and it'd be good to know who they are. So I'll put that out on the September 19th meeting.
Yeah, I'm in favor of fewer meetings, but if we need to, like.
We can always add
we
one
gotta
if we
do
have
it.
to,
Yeah,
if we have to.
I don't want to get too cozy with
Yeah.
Thanksgiving meeting. You know,
Yeah.
much as I.
I know, we've got,
fine with that.
we've been
But-
so good.
Yeah,
So I tried to look at sort of where things were light right now, and, you know, if we need to add something, we can, but. So if this suits everybody, I will send this out tomorrow as a final, and then ask Celia to put it up on our webpage to replace the one that's there. We can move on with that. Okay.
so if we want subcommittee that we're not on to look at something, what is that process?
Just
Just
bring it up.
Bring it up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would, you know, we had a little back and forth on investment policy, and I would love for the finance subcommittee to take that on at some point. Perhaps they're already planning to, but I
think they
missed that.
We have not. Yeah, so we are meeting heavy duty in the month of September because there's a lot of decisions,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff to talk about, but is that something that you would like to have decided before the budget, or is it something that can wait till after the budget?
Well, no, I'm not sure when I said this, so let me say it, my issue was, could we invest some of the money from the city if we're on an 18-month repayment schedule? Therefore, we should have an investment policy and understand what conservative investment vehicles are available to a library district.
Yeah.
If that's something that the board chooses to pursue. It makes sense?
Yeah, it does. So we'll plan on talking.
Well, so I think we ought to separate that because there's two separate questions in there. One is whether we want to do investments, and if so, what our conservative investment policy would be, blah, blah, blah. And personally, I'm all for that. The other one is whether we're going to invest money that we owe the city.
Mhm.
And I think that's a different question.
Right.
And that needs to be answered before we really have the investment policy. And we could talk about that a little bit right now if you wanted to, because I've thought about this some more. I'm very uncomfortable with that, Sam, because, well, for a couple of reasons. The primary one is these are tax dollars that have been collected for a purpose to be used in the city. And we are effectively saying we're going to take these tax dollars and use them to make money for the library. And that doesn't feel right to me because we're basically diverting tax dollars that the city would use for something else, holding on to it to make money for the library. And that just doesn't feel right. And I know there's a general perception that this is a small amount of money and it's a big city budget and they don't care. And I know that ain't so, because the general fund is so oversubscribed. I very strongly suspect that if we were to do what David suggested, which is to pay the city, 11.5 million first and then parse out the rest of it, the city would be starting up some things on the council work plan or continuing some things on the council work plan right away. If we were to give them like 3 instead, there would be things on the council work plan that would be delayed because that's how tight the money is and they are actually budgeting it that closely. So knowing that background, I'm very uncomfortable with us holding on to money that we owe the city, tax dollars that we can pay, because we think we can make some money off of it. That just doesn't feel like an appropriate, I guess, ethical stance to me or practical stance.
Well, it felt ethical to me because it was trying to maximize those taxpayer dollars for the benefit of the library.
Yeah, but then we're minimizing it for the city council and the taxes are actually kind of raised for the city.
Yeah.
Because it's not really our money. And we're ironically in the position where we're kind of better off with revenue right now than the city is because we have property taxes and they're dedicated and the city's sales tax. I don't know if you've seen their reports of the hotlines and things, their sales tax revenues are declining again. So they're very concerned about the budget.
So what would be our rationale for an 18-month repayment schedule if
I think
we give them nearly all the money up front?
I think it's, as I understood it, it was to try and look at the cash flow because unlike the city gets sales tax accumulating on a regular basis. We get our property tax payments pretty much in April and August, the bulk of it. So for us, it's a matter of, okay, we have to have enough money on hand to pay our ongoing expenses as we get to our next payment types. And my understanding was these guys had looked at the budget and said, well, we couldn't do the whole thing up front. I mean, we could, but that would get us shorter. If we give them 11.5, then we can parse out these other payments as we get our property tax revenues in over the next 6 to 12 months. So that's what I understood it to be, a cash flow kind of analysis. Did that make sense? I felt very incoherent.
No, it's right. So just to be clear, so we're saying numbers, right? So I'm spitballing 11.5. It could be 10, right? Like, so but my assumption is that what you asked from me last time was we pay as much as we can January 1. Yeah, so I don't know what that number is yet, and I won't know for a little bit of time, but let's say, if we're going to say a number, let's say 10. And then assume we pay the remaining, whatever that would be, roughly 3 or 4, 3.5, whatever, in the next 12 to 18 months. That seems doable. I just don't know what the opening number is on
No,
January.
I understand,
Don't have
but
that.
so these are just all hypotheticals.
Yeah.
That was the reasoning, was pay as much as we can upfront.
Yeah.
As Kim had said, in most cases, most library districts have paid it all upfront. So, the city's being generous to us and allowing us a longer repayment period. But in terms of investing, money overall to make money for the library district, I'm all for that. And I think there's a variety of strategies we could look at.
Yeah, will we have any money to invest?
We will, it's on my agenda for next week to come and we'll talk to Johnny and Benita about it tomorrow, but we received late Friday the assessor's estimate for 2024, and so it's good news. I think we need to float that number. It is an estimate, but it's good news, and so we'll float that number next week if that's what Benita and Johnny want to do.
So that would be like invested reserves or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so typically in a library district, this happens in every single district that's formed. You're typically cash rich in the first 4 or 5 years. You're hoping that whatever it is you set the mill levy last for 30 or indefinitely, but that's all contingent upon what happens with assessed values. I think we had cut that number pretty close with the getting to the ballot. But now with the new assessment, I think we have that cushion again, so that it looks more like a 30-year plan than it does a 5-year plan or 10-year plan. Because as you saw from the model, and we'll talk about the model further, like the model has, if the assumptions held true and the assumptions are based on 50-year averages, we'd have been in the red after 8 years where it was. Now I think it's higher than that, and so I think we're in good space. And we will have money to invest, certainly in those first 4 or 5 years. And if we invest them right, and my understanding right now is that we can get, it is a conservative investment, we can get like 3.5 or 3.7% with just using JP Morgan and saying like, we don't need this money for this year or the next 12 months. And then so they get to actually make money from that money, which otherwise they cannot do because they have to guarantee our money at 102%. So they can make money with that money over the course of a year when they can still guarantee us at 102%. But that's unlike we saw from Colo Trust, and 3.8% would have been like 6 years of Colo Trust,
Right.
Because Colo Trust wasn't making any money.
Yeah, although I looked at the Colo Trust website
It's up.
and the yields were actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
So, that's financial committee hopefully can look at those and give us an analysis, but it looked like Colo Trust was up in the 3 to 3.8% too. So they seem to have made themselves more competitive. So there are some options. The policy that I pulled off the state library website from Mesa, they were clearly doing all kinds of things. So there's clearly a box. And I think we need to look at that, but I think we need to somehow separate that from this immediate discussion, because we do need to get to an answer on what our payments will be by middle of September.
Yeah, so is that your preference to make a big upfront payment?
I'm not in this debate. You guys have to make that decision for yourself. I'm fine either way.
Okay,
Whatever it is.
and Jen, where do you sit on that?
I mean, I think that seems to be the tracks we were rolling down, so I don't have a very strong feeling about it, as long as it doesn't hobble us from doing the things we want to do. And David has assured us that it doesn't. I think it also kind of expedites us not having to deal with the city anymore, and I think that's in our interest as well. But I don't have like a super strong feeling about it. I've been kind of riding this train with everybody else, so.
Yeah,
That's-
but so what I heard from, I think from you and from Johnny is big initial payment, keep the rest for cash flow, right? And then pay it back over 18 months. So
If not sooner,
and-
yeah.
And don't invest it, right? It felt.
Well, don't,
That doesn't-
don't hold a piece back
Yeah,
to invest.
I mean, certainly I'll drop it if there's, a majority of the board doesn't want to do
Creative thinking, appreciate that.
I think we,
trying to make money for the library.
Oh, well, I know.
That's sincerely what.
Yeah.
I do
No,
think it's a
Sam.
responsibility we have. you know?
If you do have any thoughts about, I mean, outside of what David just mentioned around JP Morgan and Colo Trust, if you have any other thoughts about how we should manage the long-term investment policy, like please do share with Sylvia or with me, because I don't have a lot of experience with that sort of invested reserves piece. I mean, a little bit with the foundation, but slightly different. So yeah, if you have any thoughts
Did
about
you
that.
direct that at me?
Yes, yeah, that was a
Oh,
you.
no,
yeah.
I have no background in that. I just saw a chunk of money that I wanted to make some money for the library from.
it's good.
Yeah.
That's sort of my.
And I don't know what,
Yeah.
I don't know what that
No.
reserve investment pool looks like, but, you know, and certainly other bigger boards I've served on, you know, you do have an investment advisor and somebody who has expertise in this area and has worked with other Colorado and or specifically Boulder nonprofits. And so, you know, if we go that route, I think there is a structured approach to take to
Right.
find that, that firm or that individual to assist us.
Yeah, we
But
can
it
find
depends on
we
what,
can find a separate, JP Morgan provides that service as part of the banking that you guys chose.
yeah,
And I think by April or August of 2024, we'll have money to think about.
Yeah.
We need to start working on the policy and thinking
Yeah.
about it then, but
yeah, but there's also that piece of keeping it local or using local expertise and local, you know, and I don't know how local JP Morgan is at this point, probably not, but, right? And so, but they're local investment advisors who know sort of the character and the community. And I think that counts for a lot as it relates to either Boulder Community Foundation, where I have had this experience, or the hospital, Boulder Community Health, and, you know, big portfolios in both cases, but, you know, some very thoughtful, experienced folks. So,
And so right now, we have on September 12th, an agenda item to discuss the approach to investments. And I gave Jen and Sylvia a heads up about that as the finance committee. So I think Benita made some suggestions here. You know, Chris Barge worked for the Community Foundation. He might be somebody you could talk to about who they're using or what they're doing, but you know, that's however you guys want to
I
do
didn't.
that.
and it changes every
Is it-
3 to 5 years too.
Do we need it to be that urgent though now, Johnny, since we're not addressing the issue of the money we're holding back from the city or paying the city back in a longer term? Like if David's saying we will know what money we have to invest long-term in April of 24, do we need to have the conversation in September of this year about that topic?
Probably not. We could probably push that back to a later date if you guys want to take a look at your schedule and propose when you think it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, let's do, maybe David, we can get together on Friday and talk about when it makes sense to talk about that. I just think it might be too soon to be chatting about that.
It's not that you have anything else to do.
Exactly.
Okay, let me just line that out for the 12th. And then just to also note that the financial consultant who built the budget model, David is bringing in on the 26th to talk to us and to walk us through the budget model. So that will be an opportunity to get into the nuts and bolts of it, for those of you who want to do that. Okay. Good. All right, our one action item for tonight.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Beth Dower. I have been representing libraries for over 10 years, primarily working with Kim during that whole time. And I'm happy to be here tonight. I worked with the library district when it was in its effort to be formed. So I worked on the petition, and yeah, it's great to be back. So our one action item of the evening is this resolution requesting the county treasurer transfer all funds collected and maintained on behalf of the library district to the custody of the library district board of trustees. And this is a requirement under the library law, is 249112. And essentially, this provision states that there's a public library fund that is maintained by the county treasurer. And so all we are asking to do in this proposed resolution is to transfer those funds from that public library fund to the custody of the library district and the board of trustees. It's pretty standard. Frankly, it's already been reviewed by the county. They've already blessed it. And then obviously we've also agreed the terms as well. So I would love to answer any questions you have on this. Again, pretty standard.
Beth, I just have one question about it. One of the bullet points was that we would be providing regular banking statements, and that sort of thing. Is our bank is going to take care of that, because we don't have a professional to do that yet? Or will Kim do that? Who will do that?
Yeah, I do think that the bank will be in charge of that, because that is one of the things that we're also going to be doing. Once we get a signature on this, and assuming it is approved by the board, then we will deliver it to the bank, and that is
Okay.
more of their purview.
I just want to check that someone is going to be doing that, because
Absolutely.
none of us are doing it. So, all right, great. Thank you.
It will be the bank, Jen, but what we have to do prior to that. So once the bank account is open, and we don't know that it is yet, right? We have not gotten word from them back yet, but
Yeah.
we turned in all the forms a week and a half ago. And so before we actually start getting reports from the bank, we have to settle accounts with the city. So we, as you remember, we took out a loan of approximately $70,000 with the intent from the date that the bank opened, we would repay them in full in 30 days. And so we have not got, we need to do that statement of accounts, and that's us. So it's currently Adriana, who I don't believe you guys have had a chance to meet, but Adriana Oniakowski is in the library, and she does our bookkeeping and accounting. So
And are we also going to pay the county the election costs in the same way?
that will come out of this.
And how
Okay.
will we transmit these two things, electronically or through?
The county treasurer can't do it electronically.
Yeah, so we do have,
Which here was AC.
we do have the
From the county.
you have the possibility so that JP Morgan can print and write the checks for us, and then we'll have the signatures. So that is the plan we'll be using for those that have to accept checks.
And the payment to the county, is that just,
It's 1.5% of the entire revenue that we receive. So if you,
No, the
no,
election.
payment.
The election.
is there any?
they haven't sent a bill yet, but didn't they tell us it was over $40,000?
Yeah, that's right.
It's
It's in the
IGA.
Yes.
Yeah.
4,000 or something.
Yeah, it was not.
We don't know whether that's going to be an electronic transfer or check. We haven't.
Okay,
asked.
but we know that that's the exact amount.
Well, that's the amount that they put in the interim IGA. So yes, as far as we know, that's the exact amount. That's what we have agreed to pay, and they accepted that. So yes. Done and dusted.
And will you like hand deliver that to our county commissioners or
No, yeah.
like that?
No.
Hmm.
You want to?
Well,
I'd be happy to hand you the check. You can take-
Not as commissioners.
Right.
So-
Yeah.
So two questions about the insurance, because I'd asked about that before and I was told, till we have money in a bank, we don't need insurance. But how soon will we have that insurance policy or consideration of that?
I mean, I think, I'm surprised that we haven't engaged with insurance yet, but I think as soon as that money is received, we can do it immediately, frankly.
You're speaking specifically of D&O insurance, right?
Yeah, there was that, and I thought there was another policy, but maybe that's just it.
Well, currently the buildings and the staffing and everything is covered by the city. Everything is covered with the exception of the Board of Trustees. So you'd be looking at D&O insurance, which I know you inquired about in
Early on,
June, yeah.
right.
So, yeah, we'll need to look into that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then insurance related to the building, all of that doesn't need to happen until the IGA happens?
That will transfer until the date of transition.
Yeah. And then annual audit, what is our process for establishing that relationship?
We're in the process right now of identifying and selecting auditors for review. They're not going to have much to do for 2024 because of the 2023. It's all city funds, except there's a few counts that we have.
Mhm.
2025, it'll be a big deal, right?
Yeah.
They'll live with us for 4 months
Yeah.
to do the audit. But yeah, by that point, we'll have a firm under contract.
You may have mentioned it before, but are we doing an RFP for an auditor?
We're doing what we've done in the rest. We're getting references. We're getting references and we're looking at the auditor that the city uses. And so most of the references we're getting are coming either through our financial analyst or through other library recommendations. And it's a laundry list right now. I think there are 6 or 7 that we have online that I think we'll be talking to. Most of them are fairly big firms. The city uses a fairly big firm. A lot of library districts use a firm. I think it's Eden Bailey, isn't that right? Jennifer Eden Bailey. So we'll be looking at all of those firms.
So Bev, I don't have a copy of the previous legal status reports on my tablet here, but I think, so last month, I believe, the month before, Kim reformatted this, so he's showing what's to be done and what's not to be done. Before that, there was a last page on the legal status report that said things we have to deal with at some time, basically. And I think the insurance stuff you'll see in there. So if you want to dig that up, it's not in the current one. I think he tried to drop all the extraneous stuff off and just focus on what we're doing and what are action items and what we're not. But there was a list that was basically, I saw as these are agenda items in the future once we get over the hump.
Perfect.
So you might dig that out.
Great. Yeah. And I'll add the DNO insurance because I agree. We'll definitely take care of that.
I think you'll see that's on the list.
Perfect.
So this resolution then, this actually needs action. So can we get a motion to approve so we can get our money? I move a resolution requesting the county treasurer transfer all funds collected and maintained on behalf of the library district to the custody of the library district board of trustees. Second? Sam seconded. Okay, all those in favor? Aye, unanimous. Okay, we get our moolah. Good thing. And I think that's the last thing on the agenda. Is there anything else to go to the order?
Just a preview, like next month's going to be, I can drink and have fire hose, right? So we will provide you with the estimate, the assessor's estimated value for some discussion, and the finance committee, although Jen was sick last week, Sylvia discussed at length kind of with around thoughts on Proposition H and the implications of that and what happens with money and long-term strategies around
That's next week.
investments. Well, we're giving you simply the assessed value, but the assessed value will come as like, it's welcome news. So we will be bringing that forward as well as the visuals on the budget. So we're bringing you the 3 samples for you to look at, or maybe 6 samples, as well as then the handbook. You'll be previewing the handbook in your packet and the slideshow that will be presented. So it's a lot again.
And so just to be clear, the Proposition HH discussion is October 10th, and we usually have people coming in to do it. And Sam, I looked a little bit more at the opt-out provision, and it looks to me like it's something you decide annually based on whatever your revenues are for that year, if I'm reading this convoluted statute as well as I can. So it's not like Tabor where you lose yourself and you're out forever. So I think for us, I read that as it's not really an issue for us until the end of this year, actually probably till it passes, but it's not an issue to us until later in the fall anyway, based on revenues. But it's not something that's a once and for all kind of thing. And I think based on that language, we may already have opted out for 2023 because of the date of our election.
It's such a good question, Johnny. There is some language in Proposition HH or the SB 303 that would suggest that there's some sort of mechanism by which you actually don't even have to have that opt-out hearing. I agree with you, absolutely. If we determine that you do have to have that hearing, I think it would have to be held every year. But there are just some questions still swirling about whether or not that's really something that this district would have to do in light of its election question and what was asked in it. I'm hesitant to speak too much more on it because we haven't developed our firm position on what we're going to do with that piece. But all that to say, I read it as there's a good chance that maybe this library district would not actually even have to do that hearing.
We always have the option to do that if we choose to.
Mhm. Right.
Every property tax dependent local government has the option to say, this year we are going to collect less than the mill levy we are entitled to because our assessed value came up at a point that we don't need that money. So that is something that is always an option for folks who are sensitive to what's going on.
I think that's the discussion that we want to have. I think the finance committee would like to have that discussion at the outset in our very first year about what considerations would be in mind if there's a thought to reduce that in the first year, right? So before we get started, so that is, I think, partly what the finance committee would like to bring forward for discussion with the board over the course of the next 2 months, right? It's something to sink your head into, because right now, Prop HH somewhat overdetermines every conversation we have about money because we don't know how it's going to turn out, or necessarily precisely what all the implications of it are, not just next year, but over the course of the next decade, right? Because it does have implications that drag out beyond the year one. So it's such a big, messy bill.
Mhm.
Looks to me like it's mainly about letting the state keep a lot of money that they currently can't keep under Tabor. That's kind of the primary piece.
Absolutely. And if
You said it.
and it was good that you brought up 108 as well, because regardless of SB 303 and Proposition HH passing, SB 108 is in effect. And all that SB 108 says is that you are permitted, which was already a right that local government has, to have this temporary mill levy reduction. So yes, that is something I think particularly this year has to be a consideration made by the board. But when I was speaking about whether or not you had to have the hearing, that was for specifically for 303, not speaking on 108, which is a completely different consideration of whether or not you're going to have a temporary mill levy reduction. So there's a lot.
The experts are coming on.
The experts are coming on October
Yeah.
10th.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Well, hopefully, we've asked them. They haven't agreed.
Okay.
yet.
And you are one of those experts, you guys.
Yeah, you guys are coming.
Is this on the agenda for the Cal conference? Is this a topic?
I'm sure it will be discussed at length, but it's not on the agenda. Where it is on the agenda is at the, and if you'd like to go, I will be happy to pay your way, is to the Special Districts Conference that's going to be held up in Keystone, like in the next few weeks. If you're
I
interested.
thought Kim told us to stay away from special districts.
Well, it's a different thing, but
Okay, okay.
Prop H, generally, and I've reached out to the firm that's doing some of the presentation there to see if they will come and talk to you here. Then we know the woman, I know her, so it's like, I hope she'll say yes, but I sent her an email a week ago and I haven't heard back.
So we've tentatively scheduled that as a conversation, but I mean, we probably aren't going to know until it passes, because nobody's going to try and go in and figure out what some of this convoluted language means until they know they really have to.
Right. I think that's exactly right.
It's a crazy statute.
Yeah. And speaking of Cal, I don't know if Kim's giving you this preview for Cal or not, but so he and I are presenting, and we're actually doing a presentation on upcoming recent changes to the law. So of course, I think this will be a big topic of our presentation. Additionally, something that we love to do at Cal is we have a Ask Me Anything booth. So we'll be there with the exhibitors, and literally you can ask us anything you want. It's super fun. We've done it a couple
For
years.
free.
Absolutely. For free. Yes, it is free legal advice. And it's really good time, honestly. So if you all are available, we'd love to see you, and we'll be there the whole conference. So.
Great. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Let us adjourn then. All right. Thanks.